Hey everyone, for the first time ever, I have Mike Madrid on with me, folks. Mike is a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. He is the Latino political whisperer. It is him. He's the one. You want to know anything about Latino voters? It's Mike. And he also is the editor of the Substack you all must follow and subscribe to, called The Great Transformation. And he caught us in mid-conversation because, Mike and I were talking about what isn't being discussed in this GOP billionaires bill from hell, which, surprise, surprise, oh, look at that. Republicans in the House decide to vote for it. I am a freak and a masochist, and I was up at 4 a.m. and I saw the vote go through, much like they all pulled a Murkowski as we predicted. And this bill, folks, yes, we've talked about on this program, and I'm sure you've heard, adds $3.3 trillion to the debt. Yes. Devastating cuts to Medicaid, $1 trillion cuts to Medicaid, right? About 17 million Americans are going to be kicked off of Medicaid. Rural hospitals will be shut down. You're going to have nursing homes shut down. Death. An aspect that isn't talked about as much, and why I brought Mike on to connect the dots, is about $175 billion that will go to ICE. So, we don't have money for USAID. We don't have money for Medicaid. We don't have money for SNAP. How did they find 175 billion for ICE? And what will that do to America? Yeah. And you have to connect the dots because Trump, he won this election in part by creating a boogeyman. It was the transgender community and undocumented immigrants, right? I'm going to get rid of the transgender community and the criminals. I'm going to promote Nazi conspiracies, right? Replacement theory, the Haitian immigrants eating pets, El Salvadoran criminals, Venezuelan gangs. And people said, okay, I don't like the transgender, undocumented, I don't care. And through that Trojan horse, we are now, my words, witnessing the creation of a police state. And no one's talking about what that 175 billion to ICE will do. And this is why I brought Mike on, because Mike, before the election, I was telling him, Mike was telling everyone, especially Democrats, Latino men, don't take them for granted. And sadly, a small majority of Latino men voted for Trump, and we're also going to talk about the buyer's regret. But I've given you a lot as a setup and framing. And because the Republicans are going to pass this disastrous bill, let's start from there, Mike, and your thoughts on that and that 175 billion to ICE.
Well, Waj, thanks so much. Been a long time fan, and so I'm glad we're finally connecting. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I wish, of course, it was under better circumstances.
Of course.
But let's be really clear about what this is. You set it up perfectly. The current budget for ICE is about $10 billion. And Kristi Noem, essentially, who oversees ICE, has run out of money. With all the performative stuff that she's doing, they're running out of money right now. She's testified before Congress, like, how can you be broke? This is a factor between 10 and 15 times what they currently have. And remember, this is essentially it's essentially a quasi-military group. A lot of them masked, by the way, right? We're all seeing these videos that will be 10 times the size of what it currently is, while the borders are already under control. Like, regardless of the means of how it was done, there's nobody saying the border's out of control anymore. They're not. What they're trying to do, and here's the argument, they're trying to extricate what they're claiming was all of the Biden open border policies. Everybody who came in over the last 4 years, we want to go in and sweep them all up. They're sweeping up every day, dozens of U.S. citizens in these raids.
Yep.
Now, let's kind of start to add up what's going on here. You're hearing the president of the United States himself saying, when he went down to Alligator Alcatraz, right? Yeah, maybe we've got some bad people ourselves we need to get rid of. Yes, we probably need to look at denaturalizing people that were naturalized over the past 4 or 5 years. Folks, that's revoking U.S. citizenship. That's what they're talking about. Okay? And the size of this military group, which is operating essentially independently with little to no congressional oversight, wearing masks, rounding up people of a certain demographic profile, to your point, without warrants, it should be a bone-chilling message to all of us. Now, as Republicans were struggling last night, and I know you've been probably up all night watching this debate going on, it was Stephen Miller who was saying, This is about Western civilization.
There you go.
How do you not invest $170 billion when we finally have the opportunity to do it? Who cares about Medicare? Who cares about the deficit? Who cares about the debt? Who cares about any of these other things? This is about Western civilization. This is the terms that he's using.
Yep.
Laura Loomer is saying there's 65 million Latinos that can be eaten by alligators through this process. Literally,
Well,
that's what she's
she didn't
tweeting.
say Latinos, but she casually and deliberately seemed to have used the same number. There will be 65 million meals for alligators, and there are 65 million Latinos. But continue.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm sorry, but that's exactly right. So these inferences, this dehumanization, the cruelty, as we're going to ramp up by a factor of 10, the size and scope of what this quasi-military group is going to be doing tells us something. And what it tells us is it's not coming, folks. It's here. It's here, and we need to change our mentality about the warnings, because that when you're worried about something coming, the tactics are very different that are employed when it already exists and when it's among us. So the whole narrative, I believe, of who America is, who we believe ourselves to be, is forever changed as of this point with this budget, with this bringing on these military troops, with transferring money to the wealthiest among us on the backs of the least among us. This is something that is really foundational to changing what American identity really, really is.
Yeah, and I think this past week, folks, all masks are off, and I think they've replaced the mask, or rather, they've put on the mask and they've put on a top hat on the mask, right? A Monopoly top hat. Because I'm so glad you brought the Stephen Miller aspect of it up, because that's not being talked about as well. What we're seeing, in my opinion, is twofold. We're seeing oligarchy, the billionaires, the 1%. And this is the Republican billionaire bill, where literally they're going to add $3.3 trillion to the debt for permanent tax cuts for the richest people on earth. Who does that help? The 1%. The other aspect of this, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Mike, is not just the greed. And people have watched my show. I've always said the two original sins of America that we have refused to confront, that have brought us to this moment and literally given us its avatar, Donald Trump, is greed and racism, specifically white supremacy and like unfettered capitalism. And you're seeing it this week, and you see it in the manifestation of Donald Trump. People are focusing on the greed part. It's clear, it's naked, it's shameless. People aren't focusing on the white supremacy part. And I'm so glad you brought Stephen Miller, because what people aren't realizing, this is Stephen Miller's project, right? Part and parcel of this is all Stephen Miller, and he's been saying it for his entire career, folks. For those who haven't followed Stephen Miller like me, because you're not a masochist, in the first Trump administration, Stephen Miller promoted white nationalist talking points and white nationalist content and gave it to Breitbart. The lady who was a young white woman at the time said she's now de-radicalized. She said it came straight from Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, when they give recommendations for books, I'm sure you know this book. They recommend the same book. It's a fictional novel that is now a tract of all white nationalists called Camp of the Saints. It's a French novel, a dystopian novel. And the novel warns of a brown horde overtaking Europe. That's the book that Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon promote. And if you've seen everything in the past 6 months, for Stephen Miller, he's willing to burn America down to the ground to make it white again. He wants his country to go back to 1953, pre-Brown versus Board of Education, Immigration Nationality Act of 1965 that brought my parents here, right? You combine that with the greed, and that's what explains this billionaire bill from hell. But again, not enough people are focusing on the fact, Mike, like you said, that 175 billion to ICE. Someone did an analysis yesterday. It's so shocking. They showed all the money that is given to militaries across the world. Okay, ICE, as a result of this bill, will have a bigger budget for their military for ICE than most countries have for their militaries,
Including Israel.
and it's so. I was telling Mike right before we pressed record, and I agree with you. People might not like this commentary. I think MAGA won the coup. I think MAGA regime is here. All right. We got to think like this. They won the coup. The regime is here. The master plan is at play. and I'm using the master plan knowingly. But if I'm Donald Trump, Mike, and I want to just tease this out, and I'm going to terrify a few people, but just bear with me, folks. I said that Donald Trump would not leave peacefully. I said in 2020 he's going to do something violent. Everyone laughed at me. I said that after he loses, MAGA will get further radicalized and right wing. People said no, it won't. It'll moderate. I said take him literally and seriously when he quoted Hitler and said, "I'm going to unleash the National Guard and military against the quote enemy from within. I give you LA." I'm looking at this, Mike, and I'm thinking if the polls go down, and they will, because Donald Trump's policies within 6 months are going to make him probably the most unpopular president in modern lifetime. And there's a 2026 elections, and these Republicans know they're going to lose that election. If I'm Donald Trump and I have my own private army of masked, armed, essentially Gestapo, then now with $175 billion, it's going to go from 4,000 to 10,000 more private prisons. I will declare, and I hate to give them ideas, but this is what I would do. I would say we're under attack from Antifa, Muslims, Venezuelan gangs. I, as a commander in chief, have to declare martial law.
Yeah.
I have to make peace in America. Don't worry, we'll have elections, but for right now, I suspend it.
Yeah.
Anyone who's against me or anyone who uprises, excellent. Now I have an excuse to send ICE all throughout the country. Am I crazy, Mike? You tell me.
Not even a little bit. No, that's exactly what's happening. Look, you're hearing the language already. There's sleeper cells, right? There's going to be sleeper cells all over the place. It's this threat. It's this fear. Why are there 4,000 federalized National Guardsmen in Los Angeles when there's no conflict today? Right now there is 4,000 for no reason. Okay. There's literally no reason for that to be happening. They're not only not going anywhere, their numbers are about to explode all over the country. So yes, the imparting of martial law and using the War Powers Act is the objective. That's always been the goal because that prevents another election. That prevents any type of democratic response to as a check against this sort of unfettered power. That's why they're expanding the use of ICE, is because it's all under the control of the Department of Homeland Security. It's not the Marine Corps, although he's demonstrated obviously a willingness to do that as well. It's not one of the branch of the militaries. It's essentially a quasi-military group that acts purely at the discretion of the Secretary of Kristi Noem of Homeland Security, who, by the way, I don't know if you heard this or not, but at the press conference at Alligator Alcatraz, when they were touring these cages and making a spectacle of it, claimed that they've got somebody who was a cannibal, right? An illegal immigrant who was a cannibal who started to eat himself on the plane. Like, eating the dogs and eating the cats is not enough of a lie. They're now saying that cannibals are eating themselves, and that's how deranged these people are. So they're doing us a service by taking these people off the streets. It's the cruelty, the inhumanity is by design. It's a fear tactic that is going to legitimize these awesome enhancement of federal authorities on the streets of America in order to do exactly what you said. Call off elections. You'll see violence. You'll see terror groups will be under attack by whatever boogeyman it is that they declare. And the goal will be, again, to I think, to overturn elections preemptively.
And I want to focus on this week because I don't think we should move past Alligator Auschwitz, Alligator, whatever, Alcatraz, the concentration camp. Because, folks, in 8 days, Republicans somehow just got so inspired and they found the means and the money to build a concentration camp in Florida in the pathway of a hurricane, and then said, if the hurricane doesn't kill, and I'm not going to call them prisoners because I don't think prisoners or criminals are going to go there, folks. Just like as as Bloomberg and 60 Minutes did an analysis of the 238 brown immigrant men who were kidnapped, deported, and are currently dying in a foreign prison in El Salvador, 90+% of them have no criminal records, including Kilmar Abrego Garcia, right? We'll talk about Kilmar in a second.
90%.
Yeah. We'll talk about Kilmar in a second. But let's just focus on the obscene cruelty of Alligator Alcatraz. And also, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Because, what should be a five-alarm fire that if Obama or Biden said it would be used for 4 years,
Right.
at that press conference, he said, oh, yeah, I'm going to strip American citizens of their citizenship. And in the
Yeah.
past, he has openly said on Air Force One, oh, yeah, this deportation works. I'm open to sending American citizens. I think it's all connected to the imperial project and the fascist regime. Mike.
There's no question it is. I mean, how much more evidence do we need? And like I said, at a certain point, we have to be mindful that voices like yours were correct, that we need to start saying, it's not coming, it's here. And
Yeah.
tactically, we're going to have to start responding to it and messaging that way because this is no longer a preventative fight. We're no longer preventing something to protect democracy, fight for democracy. We're going to have to be articulating what we're fighting for, which is against what is already happening. Those may sound like subtle differences, but in campaign terminology, it's a profound shift in the way that we're actually approaching because we're going to have to recognize what we've been warning about and fighting against and trying to prevent is now with us. It's among us. It's dominant. And by the way, we're not focusing enough on how dominant the right, we call it the right wing media ecosystem.
Yep.
It's the dominant media now.
Yep.
It's not just Fox, it's Twitter, it's this whole sophisticated, none of it organic, all very moneyed, all incredibly well resourced, is the dominant media now. It is by far listened to and engaged with to an extent far bigger than the legacy media of the CNNs and MSNBCs of the world. And it's why I think channels like this are so important, but also because we have to recognize that breaking through that bubble is getting harder and harder all of the time.
Media Matters, I think it was about a month and a half ago, did a fantastic report in which they did this landscape survey, Mike,
Yeah.
and they concluded exactly what you said is that unfortunately, right wing media is mainstream media. Right wing media dominates. In addition to Fox, you have YouTube, you have, even on Substack. Now that we've, I think enough sane voices have taken over Substack, but Substack, Twitter, it belongs to a Nazi lover, Elon Musk, right? I mean, when you look at the saturation of MAGA friendly, if you will, influencers, whether it's UFC is basically an in-kind donation to MAGA. Let's be honest, right?
Right. Right.
Right-wing comedians, Joe Rogan, right? So they have infiltrated enough, and I'm going to talk about messaging in a second. We'll connect it. But speaking about messaging, you want fighters, right? I think you and I are getting to the point where something happened this week, Mike. Like, usually people who follow me, I can take a lot. I'm pretty calm. I get passionate, but I rarely get heated. It's my personality. I kind of don't. But I have kind of a righteous rage this past week because I'm seeing what the Democrats did to Mamdani and how they went after him. While this bill was being debated, they decided to attack Mamdani, right? I'm seeing the type of flaccid response they have to fascism. I'm seeing the flaccid response the Democratic centrists have. I saw Project 2029. That's the Democrats' big plan, and it has all the worst consultants who have lost several elections, right? And then the rest of us are being literally terrorized, people who look like you and me. And when Laura Loomer says, oh, yeah, these alligators will have 65 million meals. Folks, I was on News Nation yesterday with Steve Cortez. Oh, Steve. And I said, Steve, good luck, Steve, because this is what Laura Loomer said, and you're Latino, so I wish you well. And Steve says, she's not talking about me. Laura Loomer, folks, literally advises Donald Trump. She has gone to the White House twice, and Donald Trump took her advice, not his national security cabinet's advice. She took her advice on who to fire over Signalgate, right? So I just want people I'm trying to bring the facts and we're trying to be really blunt here for people to see, open your eyes and see what's happening, right? But I recall that, I was speaking out as much as I could about the kidnapping detention of Mahmoud Khalil, Rameza Ostrich, and I kept telling folks, first they'll come after the pro-Palestinian activists, then El Salvadorans, right? Then they're coming after the El Salvadorans, and now you see that unleashed against basically the whole city of LA. But Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a specific case in which it's so egregious, Mike, that for those who are overwhelmed, the Trump administration admitted they sent him in error, right? And despite them admitting they sent him an error, the cruelty is they're still holding him. They have trumped up charges. They just won't release him, right? So what happens? Democrats don't go visit him. There's one Democrat, I'm in here in Virginia, Maryland's Senator Van Hollen. He goes by himself, Mike, to this Seacott torture prison and says, I'm not going to leave until I get proof of life that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is here. It stays in the news, Mike, for 2 weeks. He gets proof of life of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And as a result of that narrative, that message coming out for 2 weeks, Donald Trump, Mike, is -19 to -21 on Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Yeah.
I set this all up because I've been told by Democrats, we got to punt on immigration. We got to punt on the border. We'll be seen as weak. Let's not talk about it. And I give you Kilmar Abrego Garcia, where a majority of Americans and even Republicans are like, what the F is this? Sorry for that big rant, but I give it to you.
No, that's a great setup. Let me try to explain how this is an issue that I've worked with since the early 1990s, the immigration issue. It is one of the most emotionally impactful issues I've ever worked on, bar none. And one of the challenges with it is people have this sort of immediate sense of how they feel about it, and there's very little movement off of it, right? So what does all that mean? What I was saying back in January before Trump took office was neither side is going to win on this immigration debate, but one side is going to lose. And what I mean by that is the side that overplays their hand first is going to lose. Guys, Donald Trump has so overplayed his hand on this, most people don't see this as an immigration issue. As I mentioned, they see it as a federal overreach, a constitutional crisis, and a violation of due process. That's why Kilmar's numbers, the whole public perception of this issue is moving decisively against Trump. The same way it is with putting national troops on U.S. streets. The same reason why this is still his strongest issue, by the way, but he's upside down on it, on border security. Okay,
Yep.
so he's negative on it. Now, again, he can't have it both ways. He's going to try, but you can't shut down the border. And remember, the whole priority of border security has dropped dramatically because people no longer feel the border is out of control. So what's happening is he's trying to resurrect an issue which he's already, quote unquote, solved. And the only way to do that is to keep heightening up and ratcheting the rhetoric. And the more you ratchet up the rhetoric, the more you're going to overplay your hand. People are already saying, dude, enough. Yeah. Like, you don't need to bring in troops into LA when there's nothing going on in LA. You don't need to increase the size of ICE by 10 to 15 fold. You don't need to, surround them with alligators, pythons, and crocodiles. Like, enough. Kilmar is a perfect example. And when the stories begin to come out about the torture that this guy went through, 9 hours of being forced to kneel down, and if you buckle, they would hit you, strike you, kick you, is what was happening. He soiled himself after 9 hours. Of course he did. Like, it's dehumanizing. And we're sending, not that Kilmar is the U.S. citizen, but there are U.S. citizens there in El Salvador, okay, that can't speak to a lawyer and get out. Like, this is happening, and the more that comes out with, by the way, the main witness against Kilmar is somebody who's being given federal immunity to turn state's witness against them, even though this guy really is a bad actor who has every incentive to lie about what's going on to get off. Like,
and he was set to be deported.
Yeah, precisely. And the Trump administration is saying, don't deport him because this guy's going to work with us as a witness to argue what we're saying. So it's not about the deportation at all. Now, they're doing damage control to contain the narrative because if the truth comes out about this, those bad numbers you just pointed out are going to get a hell of a lot worse when people see what's going on. That's the goal now, is to try to contain it and shut the story down.
And I'm glad you mentioned the polling numbers, and I want to get back to the forces at hand, right? I keep going back to Stephen Miller because people really need to understand who is one of the phantom menaces behind this administration. Donald Trump has spent 25% of his second presidency golfing. The man is MIA. He's 79 years old. He's clearly lost several steps. You can see him. Literally, we have the cameras where, as he's signing executive order, he goes, "What am I signing?" He said, "What's the Congo?" Right? He just parrots what's given to him when the president of South Africa was there. They prepared a white supremacist anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, which he shamelessly just said around the world, right? So the person who's kind of the phantom menace here, it's Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, right? And for Stephen Miller, for those who've joined us, the 700 people, we're going to have this up later, don't worry. But Stephen Miller is the man who's committed, no matter what, as Mike said, right? Saving Western civilization, saving Western civilization. He's a true Gestapo, stormtrooper, true believer, brown shirt, call it what you will. This man is ideological through and through. He really wants to make America white again. He thinks the Immigration Act of 1965 was the worst thing that happened because it brought people like me and Mike and Asians to this country, right? So for him, it's all or nothing, zero sum game. For Donald Trump, and I hope people picked up on this, because I heard this yesterday on News Nation, which is basically Fox Light, and Steve brought it up as well, Steve Cortez, is immigration and border are Donald Trump's strongest issues, right? So he looks at the numbers. He's about the ratings, right? And he says, what was the one issue that I was really strong on? Immigration, border. Okay, I'm underwater on everything, and now I'm even underwater on immigration, but I could get it back. So I'm going to supercharge it, right? And F everything up. And as he's supercharging it, right, Mike, I was saying how dumb Trump is. I was thinking about it. We're being destroyed by the dumbest people on earth. That's what makes it so painful. The dumbest people on earth are destroying us, right? Just give you that Vietnam trade. If Donald Trump had done nothing, we already had amazing relations with Vietnam. Donald Trump F's it up with this trade war, and now with his deal, we're going to pay 20% imports on for Vietnamese imports, which means prices are going to go up. Awesome, Donald Trump. But I was saying, Mike, the cruelty, if the Trump administration wasn't this cruel, thanks to Trump and Stephen Miller, and was smart, this is what I would have done. I would have blamed an ICE agent, invited Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the White House, give Kilmar a beer. I'd have a Diet Coke if I'm Donald Trump. You can't have a taco anymore because, so I have a burrito, put my hand around Kilmar, get some votes back from Latinos. But he still can't do that because he's so committed to the project. And I think what you're talking about is now they're all in. They're 10 toes down. They can't get back, right? So where is the off ramp for them? Because I don't see any off ramp for the Trump regime when it comes to this.
That's a great way to look at it. So let me, as you know, when we first started kind of interacting before the election, when I was saying, guys, pay attention, these numbers are slipping away here with Latino men. What I wanted to really bring out was the fact that, and I kept saying, 4 out of the last 5 elections, including midterms, we've been seeing this rightward shift of Latinos. It's been happening for a while. It just got really big now, so people started to panic. It's a 50-50 now. But when I say 4 out of 5, the one exception was 2018. Now, let's remember what was happening in 2018, Donald Trump's first midterm. There were ICE crackdowns, not to this extent, but they were there. They were significant. They were televised. They were worried. Fox News was running stories every day about migrant caravans.
Invasion.
The barbarians are coming to storm the gates, like pull up the moat, light it on fire, shoot them, below the knee or whatever he was saying, right? It was all designed to gin up the base. What happened? Well, what happened was we had the highest Latino turnout in midterm history and the highest break against Republicans in history, gave the Democrats the majority in the House, and that changed the trajectory of the Trump 1 administration. They're following that same game plan now. I mean, the truth of the matter is, the smartest thing Donald Trump could have done in January after being sworn in was go golfing 50% of the time. The economy was getting better.
Do nothing.
Do nothing, and you'd be sitting at 58, 59, 60% polling numbers right now. You'd be more popular than ever, but he can't help himself. He's got to do tariffs. He's got to exert his power. He's got to go after immigrants and trans people, do all of these things. He can't help himself. So now his numbers are at historic low. But my point is this. What you're probably going to see is a retrenchment of these Latino voters back to the Democratic Party in these midterms. Now, will it be back to the same extent as it was in 2018? Probably not. But will it be enough? It will be. It should be enough. I mean, all the polling number is saying that the historical trend line benefits the Democrats.
Yeah.
That the turnout model, remember, Democrats are starting to benefit from lower turnout elections now, benefits the Democrats. The issues matrix now is benefiting the Democrats. So everything is breaking towards the Democratic Party, largely because of Donald Trump's own failures. The question becomes, can the Democrats start building that agenda And I've argued whether it's Mamdani in New York or whether it's Ruben Gallego in Arizona, very different sides of the Democratic spectrum, both of them getting working class Latino response because they're
Yeah,
talking about the economy. This is not an ideological shift. It's an economic populist shift.
there you go.
And it doesn't matter what your ideas are. These voters are just saying, bring ideas to the table and we'll listen to you. And they're responding to that broadly, right? So even Bernie Sanders, to his credit, is one of the most popular American politicians amongst Latino voters. I would argue because he's saying this doesn't work. Like the system doesn't work. The establishment has failed you. Here's some ideas. And they're like, well, let's just listen to that. So I don't think it's a right, left, center, progressive, moderate, whatever. I don't think it has anything to do with that. It has everything to do with a rejection of the status quo. And right now, Donald Trump has completely cratered, not just on immigration, which he has, but even more so with the economy. And remember, his Latino number started to drop on his Liberation Day before the ICE crackdowns.
Mm,
It dropped precipitously with the announcement of the tariffs and the rattling of the markets. That's
mm.
when we saw Latino numbers start to go down precipitously.
For those who've joined us, nearly 800 folks, I called Mike the Latino Whisperer because I started following him before the election, and especially for astute analysis, there's two Latinos who I trust. It's Mike and Julio Ricardo Varela, and they were saying, listen to Latino man, you're paying, and then Democrats, because Democrats took their votes for granted. Latino men, black folks, Muslims, the base that said, "Hey, maybe this war and this genocide in Gaza, maybe you should stop it." And they said, shut up, and just vote for us. You're going to vote for us because either us or the other guy." And what happened? 17, 18 million voters stayed at home, right? And a lot of Latinos are like, this economy ain't working for me. All right, I'll buy Trump's bullshit. And now there's buyer's remorse. And Mike was like, warning, 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 right? And so I agree with you. The main reason why, let's just focus on Mamdani, it's not because he's young, sure, that helps. It's not because of the brown skin and the manicured beard, sure, that helps. It's not because of well, I will say it's because of the wokeness, but specifically what his message is the following. Let's make New York City affordable for everyone. That's
Yeah.
the basic message.
Yeah.
Why can't New York City be affordable for everyone? He goes against the billionaires. He goes against the 1%. He says, why should the landlords make all the money and the tenants can't have affordable housing? Why can't people have affordable buses? Why can't people have living wages? And he's doing something that is winning over people in that what Democrats haven't done because they're cowards. He goes, I'm not going to throw transgender people under the bus. I'm not going to throw undocumented immigrants under the bus. I'm not going to throw immigrants under the bus. I'm going to fight for them. And you saw it this week. Donald Trump, while he was at the Alligator Alcatraz concentration camp, said, if he's, Mamdani's a communist, and I always want any reporter who's watching, ask Donald Trump or any Republican to define communism. Amazing clips will happen. But I digress. He said, they're going to look to stripping his citizenship. He did a birther conspiracy and say, I've heard he's here illegally, right? And what did Zoran Mamdani say? It's a brilliant tactic. Donald Trump is just trying to distract. He's trying to bully us. We will not be afraid. We will fight back. And he's trying to distract from his horrible economic agenda. He takes the pivot back to Donald Trump's weaknesses. And what he also says is, I will fight, and I will fight on behalf of immigrants, because Donald Trump said, if Mamdani becomes mayor and blocks these ICE raids, I will arrest him. And Mamdani said, essentially, he did what Gavin Newsom said, who got his mojo back, bring it. Right? They want fighters, it seems to me, Mike. They want people to stand up for the immigrants, the undocumented, the LGBT, the woke. Just fight. Am I wrong here?
You are 100% correct. And I wrote a piece on my Substack basically arguing that this is, look, I with the Lincoln Project, I think everybody knows that. I saw the Tea Party movement happening. I had a front row seat. What signified the revolt in the Republican Party back in 2009 was a wide majority of Republicans no longer believed in the leadership of their own party. Those numbers are at the same levels they were in the Democratic Party because people are pissed that
29%.
they're not fighting. They're not fighting for anything. They're kind of like scrambling, like, are we for this? Are we for that? Are we progressives? Are we centrist? Who are we? What are we doing? And that deer in the headlights lock is like people have had it. Like, just fight. It's not that hard. Like, go at them and quit allowing them to take advantage of us. Protect weak people. Protect people who are vulnerable. And so, yeah, to me, like I said, I don't think that there's going to be the same type of loss of belief and ideology. To the Democrats' credit, you can put a Ruben Gallego and a Mamdani on the same spectrum about the size and role of government. Donald Trump is just anti-institutionalist, burn it all down. He's not trying to govern, he's trying to destroy. So there is a responsibility in the Democratic Party that's trying to figure out, like, how much should we have or should we not have. But my point is, as long as you're challenging the orthodoxy of your own party, but also taking the fight to where it's clearly at. Don't be fighting about primary results when this bill is working its way through the halls of power in Washington, D.C. Like, the fight is there. It's not over here, guys. Like, it's not, how complicated is that? I don't
And
know.
I think they revealed their weakness, their fecklessness, and their loyalty to the oligarchy and the billionaire donors last week. I mean, I think that's what really set me off is we have this bill that the Republicans are going to pass that will kill Americans and is historically unpopular, folks. Trump's most favorable rating on this billionaire bill from hell is -19. It's anywhere from -19 to -26. And folks, people still haven't found out about it. And the
Yeah.
more people find out what's in the bill, it just craters. And especially once it gets implemented, my God, the reason why on the deal, and Mike knows these folks, so many Republicans are scared, and they should be scared, is they realize that this bill will make these vulnerable Republicans extinct in 2026 if we have elections. And you just saw it happen with Tom Tillis. Tom Tillis spoke out about it. Donald Trump focused on him. Tom Tillis said, F it, I had a good run, and he was forced to resign, right? It's a cult. And what did the Democratic establishment do? They still haven't endorsed Mamdani, who won by double-digit points. He won 56%. Gillibrand hasn't endorsed him. Schumer hasn't endorsed him. Jeffries hasn't endorsed him. As what Mike was talking about over the weekend, they had the prestigious, Sunday news shows. And instead of talking about this bill, instead of talking about the $175 billion that will go to ICE that will make it more powerful than freaking militaries of other nations and will terrorize America, they attributed to Zoran chants he never said and joined Donald Trump and Republicans in smearing him. It reminds me, like you said, of what they did to Bernie Sanders. It reminds me of what they did to AOC. Folks, Democratic leaders, this is where your party's at. I'm sorry. They're not in 1992. It's not Bill Clinton. It's not Clyburn. It's not Biden. This is where they're at. And with Latino voters, I noticed this trend, and you mentioned it, when it was 2020 and it was Bernie versus Biden, right? The litmus test for most of us, Mike, was, and I'm going to be blunt for all the white folks. People of color said this: whoever white voters will back, that's who we'll back because we need to beat Trump. All right, whites, you figure it out. But it was between Bernie and Biden, if you remember.
Yeah.
And Bernie, the reason why he got traction, and he was almost neck and neck with Biden until Clyburn came out for Biden, was the white and Latino voters in the West, Nevada, Arizona, California, right?
California. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you just talk about that? Because folks, this is where we're at. The
Yeah.
people who said they voted for Donald Trump said, you know who I would have voted for in 2016? Bernie. In 2024, Donald Trump voters also voted for AOC. Ruben Gallego and Mamdani, what do they have in common? They fight. They're blunt. They take on the establishment. It's the anti-establishment, anti-1%, talking about the many versus the few, fighting the oligarchy narrative that Latinos in 2020 were like, yeah, we'll take Bernie over Biden. You know this better than I do. I just want you to connect the
By
dots.
wide numbers. By wide numbers. They were with Bernie over Hillary. So 2016 is when I first started to see, wait, there's an earthquake building. This is odd. And there was a generational split. Again, let me be a little bit nerdy and academic here, but it's probably a nerdy audience a little bit, so they might appreciate this. In 2016, I saw something that I'd never seen before, which was that if you were a Latino under the age of 35, you were voting like 80% for Bernie. If you were a Latino over the age of 35, you were like 80% for Hillary. And so Bernie almost wins I would argue he did win the Nevada caucuses. It's just they weren't able to kind of do the counts. This is going back in the kind of ancient history now, back in the 2016 primaries. But we had never seen that split before. And it wasn't ideological, to your point. If you're looking at Latinos, and I would argue most working class people, as right and left, you're missing what is happening in America. It's about top down. It's about insider versus outsider. It's about have and have not.
There you
It's
go.
who the system works for and who it does not work for. That's the revolt that's happening right now. Keep in mind, the same people that voted for Mondani voted for Donald Trump 6, 7 months ago in New York City
Yep.
and voted for Eric Adams 4 years ago. A centrist Democrat to a right wing populist nationalist to a democratic socialist. What does that tell us? It tells us that people are not, they want the establishment to come down.
Yes.
They want a new voice. What Zoran is giving them, whether you like it or not, he is giving them some policy prescriptions to fill that void. Trump was just saying, burn it down. And they're like, that's enough. Okay. What is happening on the left is there is at least a policy framework and debate while there is this emerging recognition that the establishment doesn't work anymore. It's collapsing. And Cuomo couldn't be a worse embodiment for the establishment than anybody else. I mean, the guy was just, kicked out in disgrace not long ago, right? I mean, literally months ago. This
And,
is something. Go
no,
ahead.
no, go ahead. Continue.
Well, I was going to say, until we recognize that the right-left spectrum that we 90% of pundits still talk about doesn't exist anymore, people. The Republican Party hasn't talked about smaller government since Donald Trump was elected. We were talking about it earlier. They're increasing the size of ICE to violate constitutional rights by 15-fold. That's not smaller government. These are the jackbooted thugs that Republicans used to yell about in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. They're literally hiring them by a factor of 15. Okay? So stop thinking that works with the Republican base. It doesn't. It's all about haves and have-nots. Who's running the establishment institutions and who is not. And let me wrap up real quick on this to give people some perspective. The Democratic Party, and there's some virtue in this, is trying to protect institutions. It's why in 2024, the range went from Liz Cheney to AOC. That was the coalition. The problem is, in protecting institutions that aren't working for real people,
There you go.
you put yourself in a position that you're going to lose that argument and debate 9 times out of 10. You're defending the indefensible. New York City is not affordable. California is not affordable. You cannot buy a house in these places. The cost of groceries matters. People might ridicule people for knowing the price of eggs and voting on the price of eggs. If you've got hungry kids and grew up like a poor kid like I did, you know what the price of eggs is. You know what the price of gas is. You know what the price of everything is when you're paying 50% of your income for rent or the mortgage, or letting somebody rent a room in your family because you're going to lose that house if you don't. Like that's how real people are struggling to get by right now. And so the idea of whether or not government should be bigger or smaller is an irrelevant discussion to 90% of working class people who are just saying, who the hell is talking about the economy? I don't care about ideological prisms anymore. I don't have that luxury. I just want somebody who's going to fight for me. And I don't care how you fight, just fucking fight.
From your lips to God's ears and the inboxes of Democrats, I've been saying for a while, the reason why I thought Biden, he stretched as much as he could, but why him and that class was not enough to move us forward is because if you guys notice, he kept talking about this isn't who we are. And a lot of Americans like, this seems exactly who we are. We don't have money. The institutions don't help us, right? And you want us, and and the Democratic establishment, going off of Mike's point, still had the narrative of restoration. And for many Americans are like, restoration to what?
To what?
Yeah, I want
Right.
reformation. These institutions, these hallowed institutions that you want me to protect, these institutions have been sources of oppression. These institutions have been run by the 1%. These institutions do not benefit me. They oppress me. These institutions have individuals whose boots are on my neck. So here you are as the 1% telling me to support these hallowed institutions and giving
Right.
these hallmark slogans about America, but
Right.
I can't afford friggin' a house and I'm on my dad's like friggin' insurance and I'm 26 years old and I don't have money to go on dates or get married. What the F are you talking about? And this is why Donald Trump, in part for many other reasons, what did he say, folks, in 2016? I'm an outsider. I'm going to tear down the institution. I'm going to be a bulldozer. That's what he said. The difference, and there's a lot of differences, is there between him and an AOC, a Mamdani and Bernie, is that they actually are sincere, authentic, don't want to burn down the institutions, want reformation, and they have ideas. But the common thread is economic populism.
Yes.
Populism. I'm
Yeah.
an outsider.
Yes.
The people on the inside are corrosive. It's
Yes.
desiccated fossils who are corrupting and hollowing out America for the 1%. They don't represent me. F you. I want anyone to come in and F these mother effers up. The rage, Donald Trump tackles that short-term rage where you punch the wall and then later like, oh shit, I have a hole in my wall and I have bloody knuckles. Whereas I think the AOCs, the Mamdanis, and the others, you don't have to agree with all of them. They're like, here's a prescription. And then when Fox, shows the prescriptions, I think Fox, I don't know if you've seen these chyrons and these memes, the Fox viewers are like, oh, taxing the rich. Yes. And Fox like, anyway, let's talk about immigrants.
Right.
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 I want to keep you for a couple more minutes, Mike, if you don't mind, because I hope 5 more minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, let me underscore your point real quick. 5 minutes is fine. The reason I call my Substack The Great Transformation is because we need to transform these institutions for exactly what you just said. They're failing working class people. They just are. And so in order to recapture that sentiment and build that into a movement, we have to rethink them. And just bringing ideas to the table, whether they're right or they're wrong, is enough to engage working class voters. That's something that the Democrats really have to understand, because if they don't, if they keep just protecting, this is why I was so critical of the protecting democracy. Yes, it's true. Yes, I support that. But what they're really saying is all of the institutions that have worked for 250 years, but no longer do. That's what the Democrats were messaging. Is if you ask the average person if they trust the media, if they've got confidence that government can solve these problems for them, they're going to say no. That doesn't mean that they won't give you the benefit of the doubt if you've got ideas to make it work, but don't try to tell me that if I just understood better what the S&P 500 was doing, I could pay my rent, because that's not the way working class people think.
And to wag your finger at people and say capitalism is good, democracy is good. People are like, what has it done for me? Which is why you're seeing more people open to democratic socialism. I don't know what that means. Affordable housing, sure, whatever. Call it whatever you want. And Democrats are willing to burn down a rising candidate and burn down their own party instead of evolving. They're not built for this fight. They're not made for this moment, folks. They're not. Schumer, Gillibrand, Hakeem Jeffries are not. I've been saying it for years. They're not made for this. You need new leadership. You need a culling. And this is where I wanted to talk to you about, because you and me both have gray hairs and you and me both remember.
Yeah.
Let's go back real quick and connect the dots for people. 2012, Eric Cantor. I'm here in Virginia. You remember the Republican establishment? The future of the Republican Party will be Eric Cantor. It'll be
Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan.
Yeah, Paul Ryan, and it'll be Kevin McCarthy. Can you tell us what happened to Eric Cantor?
Well, Eric Cantor was one of the strongest, most powerful voices in the House, and there were these three kind of young archetypes of what the future of the Republican movement was going to be. Eric Cantor, in a surprise primary, lost. One of the most powerful, well-resourced members of the Republican Party lost to an upstart Tea Party advocate, and it wasn't close. It wasn't a nail-biter. It was an absolute rejection of the establishment that was going on. That's why, like I said, if you look at the polling numbers and if you look at what is happening, it is basically a mirror opposite image in the Democratic Party today as to what was happening in the Republican Party. We are in an anti-institutional moment. We are in a populist moment in American history. And the Democratic Party cannot continue to believe that it's going to protect this two-party system and keep running establishment candidates as a way to protect institutions, because it's not going to work. Its own party doesn't want that anymore. It's not working for its working class base. It is working to a lesser extent, for wealthier, white, college educated voters who animate the base, who really control the party. But if you look at people of color and working class people, they're fleeing the party. It's one of the reasons why there's this existential crisis in the Democratic Party, is because the orthodoxy of the party is based on we're the party of the working class and we're the party of non-white people. Well, what happens when both of those groups leave you and have been leaving for a while? You don't know what to do. So suddenly the leadership is like, do we go right? Do we go left? Do we go top? Do we go down? Or do we just make these silly memes and GIFs online and try to pretend like we're hip and we're cool and know what's going on? And that's where this vacuum is being filled by the energy that is coming from the Mamdanis, the AOCs, Bernie Sanders with all of these rallies. This is the same insurgent movement that is part of a huge part of that message from those groups are the Democratic Party is just as big of a problem as the overall system. Guys, that's exactly what the Tea Party and the Trump movement was saying. And notice that both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders dramatically exceeded conventional wisdom with working class and Latino voters. There's a reason for that. They're not running a traditional establishment right-left campaign. They're running a top-down campaign. They're running against their own establishments. That's why they're getting traction, is if you run against your own leadership, it shows a fierce independence to say, we're not going to be part of the same racket that's not working for you. We're going to challenge the system, and it's working. It's connecting. That's what you saw in New York City. That's what you've been seeing for the better part of a decade, starting with Bernie and Trump in 2016.
And don't listen to me, folks. Mike and I have the gray hairs. Listen to Mike. 2012. I'm telling you, I'm getting 2012 vibes here. And sadly, when it comes to the Democratic establishment, and notice I'm not saying all Democrats. When it comes to the establishment, they remind me of the squirrel that just like, hey, give up the acorn. Just give up the acorn and you'll be free. And the squirrel just can't give up the acorn, so it's stuck in the tree, right?
Yeah.
That's what they remind me of. This Democratic establishment cannot give up the acorn of whether it's APAC money, 1%, the oligarchy, the return to the 90s, listening to Third Way, listening to corporate consultants, listening to James Carville, who hasn't won an elections, this century. They just can't give it up, Mike. And just like the Republican establishment would not give it up due to hubris, arrogance, due to bad habits, due to corporate consultants, right? And they were completely blindsided in 2012. And right now you see Democrats being completely blindsided. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think they're going to change. The last question I want to ask you, because when it comes to ICE, I'm old enough to remember ICE never existed in the 20th century. I'm old enough to remember ICE was created during the failed war on terror. I'm old enough to remember that I warned about the creation of ICE and Department of Homeland Security and Patriot Act because I said, right now, y'all are going to go against the Muslims. Well, once you give this much power to the government, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it can and will be used against American citizens. And now we're seeing ICE. Why do we need ICE?
We don't. I mean, not structured that way. I'm not saying, abolish ICE or whatever. There's a role for immigration customs, enforcement. There absolutely is. I mean, that was a little bit flippant. But we certainly don't need it at 15 times of what it currently is. The only reason that you would do that is to go after the people, like you said, your political enemies or the people that you do not want here, the people that you do not believe are fully American. That is the only reason that you expand the budget by that significant amount. And using fear of a foreign enemy is going to be the opening salvo in the dramatic expansion of the militarization of American society. You were saying it during the Patriot Act. That's exactly what this is. That was the door opening. This is not just about Mexicans. It's not just about Latinos. It may be at the moment, but the predicate has been set. They are already talking about going after U.S. citizens. It's a very small leap to go from that to be you're no longer just a undocumented, you're an enemy of the regime because you're speaking out on behalf of protecting those people. That's a very, very small step. That next step is not a big one. That's where this is headed. That's what we're going to be facing. I think in many ways, that's already what we already are facing.
And this is where I'll disagree with you, but let's see if I'm right on this. I think I'm for abolishing ICE. I think we have other mechanisms to keep the border safe. And I think
Yeah.
ICE become these jackbooted thugs and keeps terrorizing Americans, which they will, not just in LA, folks. Just watch. I think within 6 months, you're going to see if any Democrat says openly, abolish ICE, right? Right now, they're testing it right now because, they want to win on some other issues. Uh, You're going to see a lot more traction in 6 months on abolish ICE. And people will say, no, no, don't say that. Just give it 6 months. If I'm wrong on this, I'll admit I'm wrong, like I always do. But I think with this budget, bringing things back full circle with $175 billion, thanks to this GOP billionaire bill from hell going into ICE, making it more powerful than the military and armies of many countries around the world, with them being masked and armed and terrorizing LA and now pretty much all across America, with them essentially emerging as the Gestapo of Donald Trump, with the emergence of more private prisons, more concentration camps. That's what's also the budget's going to, folks. More private prisons. So yeah, more alligator islets. We won't have schools, but America will have prisons. We won't have hospitals, but we will have private prisons, right? And I want to remind folks that the stock of one particular industry shot up as soon as it was announced Donald Trump won the election. Private prisons.
Listens.
Mike, fantastic. I kept you 20 minutes longer, man. We should do this
Oh,
again. It was the first time I
pleasure.
ever talked to you. I said before, I've been listening to Mike because I saw his tweets. I'm like, I think this guy's onto something. So I've been following him and my friend Julio as the Latino whisperers, as I say.
Julio's great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And how do people shamelessly promote yourself? How do
Yeah.
people follow you, listen to you? Tell them.
Best place to find me is on Substack, The Great Transformation. I'm writing on these topics daily. That's, again, how Waj and I got connected. But I am on Twitter, still on X. Unfortunately, I'm at Madrid_Mike. I'm on Blue Sky. You can find me, Mike Madrid, there, Threads, all the places. But where I'm spending most of my time is on Substack. Love to have you guys join the community, the conversation. And I'm just so honored that you reached out, and let's please do this again. This is only going to get, more.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it on your Substack next time whenever you have time.
Yeah.
Just give me an invite. And folks, for the 900 people who have tuned in on a July 3rd, which is amazing because most people take the weekend off. The whole conversation will be up in about an hour, hour and a half on Mike's and my Substack. I strongly recommend just listening as Mike connects the dots. We take it from 2012 to 2024 and beyond to explain the current moment. 2025, hopefully 2026, there'll be some change. Folks, this is the left hook. I've kept everything for free. There's no paywalls. I'm like Blanche Dubois. I depend on the kindness of strangers. If you have a few bucks, please become a paid subscriber. If you don't, just subscribe, spread the word. I believe that people should be informed during the struggle for our democracy and the fight against fascism. I use the F word. Trump is a fascist. If you don't believe me, I just give you the past week. The fascist regime is here, folks. We need the majority. The beautiful thing is we have the numbers. I said this. We have the numbers. No matter how much Stephen Miller tries to hijack us back to the 20th century, we live in the 21st century. There are too many Mike Madrids, too many Wajhat Alis, too many of us have a little bit of power, a little bit of money, a little bit of influence, right? We ain't going back without a fight. So we have the numbers and we have to organize. And people said to me yesterday, Mike, well, what can I do? And I gave someone this advice and they sent me this beautiful message. They said, I took your advice. Local, local, local. Focus what's happening in your local community, your house, your street, your city council, your school boards. And then someone said, thank you so much. I just messaged a city council person. And those are the people that you literally see every day. They need you. You're accountable to them. That's how Republicans actually implemented this, right? They went city
Yeah.
council, city council, city council,
Yeah.
right? Grassroots, local mobilization, no King's rally, all the Latino leaders who are putting pressure in LA. That's why Dodgers said no to ICE. It wasn't
That's
because of
right.
top down. It was bottom up, right? It was
Yeah.
those local leaders, right? That's why Dodgers gave $1 million to immigrant rights. It wasn't because of top down. It was because of bottom up. So focus on that. And tomorrow, it's July 4th. If you can, everyone, take a break, relax, enjoy your family. We don't need martyrs. This is going to be a long walk. We need you live, joyful. We need joyful fighters. We need people healthy, happy, in good relationships, modeling good, joyous, righteous resistance, because this is a long walk. It's going to take a generation. It's going to take a generation. It's generational reformation. As Mike said, and go to his Substack, the great transformation doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. So we need to walk that long walk. Thank you, Mike, for joining me. Everyone, be kind, be empathetic, take care of yourselves, and please don't be a fascist. And I'm back. I'm back at 1:30 with Joy Reid. So if you want to, if you're ready for some more mean Joy at 1:30, we're gonna piss off all the right people. Mike, let's talk again soon, man.
Thanks, friend.
Bye.